back to the ID Talk podcast. I'm Alex Perala, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Tony Bitsionis. Tony, how are you doing?
I'm good, Alex. How you doing?
I am doing well. I'm excited to talk to our guest this week, Frances Zelazny. She's the co-founder and CEO of Anonybit, which is taking a really interesting approach to biometric identity. So I'm looking forward to that. But before we get to that, we should talk about any major news that our listeners need to be aware of. And before we get to that, I just want to remind everyone that Acuity Market Intelligence has a new Prism report out, the Financial Services Prism. It's a comprehensive look at biometrics in the financial services sector. Everybody in the industry knows the principal analyst at Acuity, Maxine Most. She really knows her stuff. She was on a recent show with us, and her expertise came through crystal clear. So you can read their full reports if you just go to the-prism-project.com. Just short form to fill out to get the report. And I also just want to mention that it is Identity Week Europe this week as we record. It's just about to get underway. So you can follow all the action at identityweek.net. It's obviously one of the biggest events of the year in the biometrics and identity industry. So definitely worth paying attention to. So all that having been said, let's quickly talk about some news before we get to Frances. So Tony, is there anything that you think we have to flag for our listeners this week?
Yeah. I think there's one thing in particular, just because it relates to a conversation that we were having on the show a few weeks ago, and it's to do with TSA, the TSA and funding for its biometric entry and exit program. And if our listeners recall, the head of the TSA, David Pekoski, was campaigning to Congress for an increase in funding for the biometric program, or for the TSA in general, saying that at the current funding that they were receiving, they wouldn't be able to complete their goal of having biometrics in every airport, or what is it, 400 or 500 airports is the goal in the United States?
I think it's 400 something.
400. He said that it would be 2049 before they could accomplish that goal under their current funding. And this week, the story is that the DHS has found some more funding to help with this problem. So this is through an existing fee that stems from post 9/11 changes that were made to travel in the United States, and the fee relates to visas for foreign workers, and it is paid by employers who have more than 50 employees, and more than 50% of those employees are under these visas.
Right.
So yeah, it's a little complicated, but the main thing to know is the changes that were made were under the new structure. They will be charged fees for not just employees who switch companies and new arrivals, but also anybody who apply for an extension of stay petition under these visas. So I think the fees are somewhere in the range of $4,000 and $4,500 US for every transaction. So this money will go to the TSA, and hopefully it'll help expedite the completion of their, or the accomplishing of their goal.
Yeah. So basically it's like previously employers would have to pay, they got a certain number of employees, and these employees have visas to work there, and they have to pay a fee because of 9/11.
Yeah.
And now the Department of Homeland Security wants to change the rules so that they have to pay that fee in even more situations.
Yeah, exactly.
Workers. Okay.
Quite simply, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess like one of the takeaways there is that, you know, the head of the TSA, David Pekoski, is like, we don't have the funds. We're not going to get our border secure according to plan for another like few decades. And he's saying that to Congress, which is at the time of recording completely dysfunctional. and like knows that nothing's going to happen. And then the DHS is like, well, we can tweak this little thing and it'll help.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So that's that. What did you want to flag for this week?
I wanted to quickly talk about some stuff that happened in Texas. So this is about Texas has it, like notably together with Illinois, I think it has maybe the second most famous biometric privacy law. And the Texas Attorney General had filed a lawsuit against Facebook. And recently there was a report that Facebook has settled the lawsuit. And then almost immediately after that report came out, the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, his office announced that they were setting up a new enforcement team to go after companies that violate the state privacy laws like even more vigorously.
Hmm.
So it's I mean, I'm sure they would say that we're just defending the rights of Texans, but it does kind of seem like
Yeah.
they got a big win, presumably. We don't know how much Facebook settled for yet at the time of recording, but they got a big win, and they saw that this is a way for, I guess, for the state to make a bunch of money in addition to defending privacy. And they're like, let's go after even more companies. Let's be even more aggressive. That's kind of my read of it. Is that unfair?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he's doing his job, right? Isn't it the Attorney General's job in the state of Texas to be the one who puts forth?
The lawsuits.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's actually like a much more charitable way to put it than I did. It is his job.
Yeah.
And that's because whereas in Illinois, the Biometric Information Privacy Act has a private right of action, meaning anybody, any citizen can file a lawsuit alleging that some company violated it. In Texas, the Attorney General is the one who decides who to go
Mhm.
after. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is his job. And it just so happens that this could be very lucrative for the state.
Yeah.
These huge fines. Although again, like as I mentioned, we don't know how much Facebook settled for yet.
That's true. That's true. And I believe Minnesota just signed their Data Privacy Act into law, and I think it's the same situation there, where the Attorney General will be the one who brings cases forward. So I guess we'll wait and see if they take a page out of Ken Paxton's book, or
Mhm.
if the Minnesotans are less aggressive,
More chill, more
more chill.
go
Yeah.
along to get along. From what I've heard, they're a bit more like Canadians in the culture. So
Hmm.
could
All right.
be that Facebook might be okay there, but we'll see.
We'll wait and see.
So you listeners, if anyone wants to read more about any of this stuff, just head over to findbiometrics.com. We've also got a lot of interesting news about digital identity stuff going on, especially in Europe, on our sister site, mobileidworld.com. And with all of that out of the way, let's check in with Frances.
Yep. Let's do it.
All right, we are very pleased to welcome to the show Frances Zelazny. She will be very familiar to listeners. She's very experienced in the biometrics industry. A lot of people will know her from BioCatch, and she is the co-founder and CEO of Anonybit, which is a new startup that has a very innovative approach to handling biometric data and authentication. So Frances, welcome to the show.
Welcome,
Thanks so much
Frances.
for having me.
We're really glad you're here, and we know that you have some pretty big news that is coming out this week about a partnership with Armatura, so we definitely want to hear about that. But before we get to that, um, I'm curious just to have you explain a little bit about your platform in general and what makes it unique, because it really is unique in how it approaches biometric data and storage. So For any listeners who might not know, please just let them know about the platform and what makes it kind of unique.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anonybit is really solving for biometric security, storage, and processing. We have our innovation is around how do you manage biometric data without a centralized honeypot. As many of us know through the years, the choice has been to store a biometric in a database, a SQL database somewhere, or do you rely on a biometric that is stored on a device and then you need to either manage a device or deal with the fact that you don't know who's behind the device for a particular transaction. And our goal was to eliminate this choice and to get the best of both worlds. We are using a technology known as multi-party computation. And it's a decentralized / distributed framework, but it's not on the blockchain. It does have similar attributes in terms of nodes, but we use the nodes not just for storing data and recording data, but we use the nodes to process data. So that's why it's called multi-party computing, because each node is a party and they are responsible for part of the computation. So what we do with this network, it's this multi-party network, is we take the biometric data and we break it up into what's called anonymized bits. That's why the name of the company is Anonybit. And we distribute these bits throughout the different parties where we have the nodes, and we have different types of nodes. So we have storage nodes that where the bits are stored and they're kept and they never come out, even for matching. And when we want to do the match, we break up the face again. I'm saying face, but it doesn't have to be face. It can be any modality. We break up the face again, and then we compare the new bit against its stored counterpart using a different type of node. And these calculations are happening in parallel. And what's interesting is that it's only the computations that are coming back. We never, ever, ever put the pieces back together again. So like I won an award a few years ago, and my line was, "We don't put Humpty Dumpty back together again." And until today, people are like, "You're the Humpty Dumpty lady." So we do not put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Sorry, Humpty Dumpty. But we're doing the storage and the matching in a distributed way. And what we discovered when we developed the technology is that we could use this approach for 3 super interesting functions that have a lot of significance in the world of identity. So the first one is one-to-one biometric matching. Have I seen Alex or Tony? Are Alex or Tony who they claim to be? Yes or no? Very simply put. The second functionality is one-to-many. So classic one-to-many lookups. Are you in the gallery? Have I seen you before? And the third is non-biometric data storage and retrieval. I know I think you guys covered our Data Vault upgrade announcement a couple of weeks ago. So that really talked about how we can eliminate data breaches of any kind of information. But so we took these capabilities and we packaged them. So the one-to-one and the one-to-many form what we call the Decentralized Biometrics Cloud, which works with any modality and any third-party algorithm, which I guess we'll get to in the context of the announcement. And then we have the Decentralized Data Vault that stores tokens and images and other data that you might need along the way in the identity lifecycle. And around these two things, we built the Genie. So the Genie is what unifies the user lifecycle from account origination or digital onboarding, depending on which words you want to use, to authentication and account recovery. So in the world of Anonybit, no more pins, no more passwords, no more knowledge questions at any point, at any interaction point. So it's like, to me, it doesn't do any good if you have passwordless authentication at the desktop. but then you tell the employee to call the help desk, and then they have to say what their mother ate for breakfast and what their pet's name is and what their favorite color is, because that's where the hackers are going to go. That becomes the weakest point. So with Anonybit, we're able to serve any channel, any interaction point with a consistent, persistent biometric across the user journey, ensuring that the underlying biometrics are completely safe and secure from hacks.
Okay, I'm really glad you explained that, because I understood the basic concept going into this of the sharding the biometric data into different pieces and storing it in different places. But I didn't fully understand how you could actually then determine identity based on that. I actually was, this might interest you, I was talking to a consultant like just this morning, somebody who works on digital ID projects, and he just wanted to ask me about biometrics because he basically told me he'd been like avoiding learning about it because it's so complicated. And he was just trying to just get the basics down, and he brought up Anonybit, and specifically, and he was like, they're doing something interesting, right? And I said, yeah, they are. Like they're cutting data up and storing it. And then he was saying, but then how is it actually matched after that? And I said, I don't really know. Like, it sounds cool, but and I told him, like, I'm going to be talking to the Anonybit CEO, so I'll ask and hopefully we'll have an answer for you. And so I think, if I understand correctly, you're saying the computation itself is like, there's one piece of computation for this shard, I'm just calling them shards of data, saying, okay, this matches, and then a separate computation for another piece and a separate for another piece, and you're just looking,
Exactly.
every green light lights up, and then you have a match.
Yeah, but what's also, so yes, except that in the world of biometrics, because we actually don't need all of the shards, all of the computations to come back. So as long as you have a majority that come back, then the person is who they claim to be. And in this way, you have a lot of redundancy and resiliency, and then you account for, all kinds of thresholds and things like this. So, so yes, we're only doing the computations in parallel, and it's only the computations that come back, but you don't need everything to come back because that would be inefficient.
Yeah,
and it's incredible. We figured this. We've cracked this nut now, and we've seen this working across like any algorithm, any modality. It's definitely scalable.
And I can't quite remember if you said this specifically, but I guess just to be clear to listeners, one of the big advantages of this approach is that if there's somehow a hack attack against like one server, that data is useless because it's not, they'll only get a small piece of somebody's data that is stored.
Yeah, so that's the privacy by design component of this, that each of the shard, these anonymized bits, are essentially meaningless derivatives of the original sample. We actually do not need the original biometric image, and we do not need the original, the template. So in the world of Anonybit, no biometric templates, no images, nothing to find, nothing to steal.
And so what kind of modalities are supported in the platform?
So we validated this with pretty much all of the modalities. We've deployed it to date with selfie primarily. So all of our deployments today are with selfie. But what we're announcing now is the addition of Palm with this partnership with Armatura, which we're really excited about, especially given the resurgence that Palm is having in the market. So people that know me know that, from the early days, my vision for Anonybit was to enable the industry so that we could, as a whole, go privacy by design and take away a lot of the concerns, reticence that consumers, stakeholders, policymakers would not have around biometric security and the fears. And given where Palm is going now, I think it's really exciting for us to to be a part of that, to have a seat at the table as this modality experiences such a resurgence. And it's not just payments, it's in healthcare, it's in access control, time and attendance. So I'm really excited about this.
Why do you think Palm is so resurgent? Like, I know even like Amazon is pioneering it for their like self-checkout system that they have at Whole Foods, which I think is in every Whole Foods now in the US.
Yeah.
Although I haven't seen it at my local Whole Foods here in Toronto yet, but it is, I wouldn't have guessed that this would be the modality like 5 years ago because everyone was so fixated on fingerprints, but I can say I get it. Like I guess it's that you just wave your hand,
Well,
basically.
even Maxine, when we were speaking to her recently, she was going on about how big of a deal Palm is for her own personal experiences at Whole Foods.
That's right.
She said
Maxine
specifically that
Most
she
of
didn't.
Acuity Market Intelligence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so everybody knows Maxine. I can't get on this podcast ever without talking about Maxine. So hopefully she's listening, and she knows that how much we appreciate her insight. So why do I think Palm is having such a resurgence? Actually, I think a lot of it goes back to privacy, to be honest. I don't think it's about like, I don't think waving your hand is necessarily harder or easier than taking a selfie or vice versa, personally. But I think a lot of it is privacy. So, you know, when I first started in this space and I was really focusing on face, we were talking about facial recognition as being the modality that people would gravitate towards the most, away from finger, because finger had this criminal connotation and people would not want to just do business with their fingerprint. But we sit on the laptop and I use my finger all day long to unleash my screensaver. But I think with Palm, what's happened with all the backlash around deep fakes and photos and Gen AI and okay, if somebody steals my picture, then they can do something with it and so on and so forth, which is like a whole other podcast conversation probably. Palm doesn't really have that. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to like, okay, so I give you my palm. Like, what exactly are you going to do? I mean, I could tell you, like, we can talk about injection attacks and things that are more sophisticated, but the average person doesn't really think about that. They just think like my palm is not on Facebook, my palm is not on LinkedIn, nobody can record my palm necessarily. And so I think it's just got this like just off the cuff for people that are not really thinking about how fraudsters are operating today. It's just kind of just a little bit easier. It's just, I think. Also, I think it doesn't have as many issues around like, at least I haven't heard, I don't know, but things around like racial bias and gender bias and like stuff like that. Like you don't get into those complexity. But all that being said, obviously Palm is not is not applicable to every single use case. And so this is not like we're not living in a world of one size fits all. You need to have multiple modalities for all kinds of different situations. Like right now, something we're working on is with Iris for a pharmaceutical access application where the people are gloved and they're masked, and so Iris is really the modality of choice over there. But I think in a consumer situation, Palm has a lot of attractiveness, and you could do one-to-one, one-to-many, and yeah, it's easy. You don't need training, right? You just kind of wave your palm.
It's easy and there's no baggage. It sounds like
That's the word I was looking for. It doesn't really have baggage.
Yeah.
But make no mistake, I mean, fraudsters and attackers operate in another realm. And so protecting the biometric data, even if it's not a modality that has baggage, it is important to protect that modality because there are other risks around compromised templates from a technical standpoint, and also obviously regulatory and other issues around potential data breaches and responsibility around storing and managing this kind of sensitive information.
Frances, going back a little bit, you mentioned multiple modalities. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the other partnerships that you've had with Anonybit?
So, like I said, we ported 6 facial algorithms to date. We work a lot with Rank One on the facial side. We've also worked with several others. Our deployments, we've publicly announced deployments in Latin America with a digital onboarding provider that has their own algorithm, and that's an interesting use case actually for all of the onboarding providers, because as the industry is moving upstream, downstream, however you want to characterize it, and as IDV players need to store the information that they're collecting, how they store it becomes, really important. And a lot of them have their own algorithms. So they want to be able to leverage, their capability. And so they can, with Anonybit, they can apply their algorithm to our privacy by design framework, and then still be able to, deliver the total solution to the market. So we've done, I think I mentioned, about 6 facial algorithms, and then we've tested other modalities as well. We're actually showcasing this Armatura integration. We're showcasing it. It's ready to be deployed now, and it's something that I think the market will take to very positively, especially because in Palm, another interesting point is that oftentimes the templates are stored on the readers, and with the risk of IoT compromise and whatnot, getting the templates off of the readers into a secure cloud environment is very, very attractive.
That makes a lot of sense. I did want to ask about, I guess, going back to the central concept of splitting up the data and storing it in separate pieces. It's pretty obvious to Tony and I why that is such a smart approach. But when you're dealing with like end clients, do they get it? Or is it like, are you finding you have to do a lot of explaining to get people to understand why this is so important? What's your sense with that?
So I get asked that question a lot. Actually, what I get asked by partners, they're like, are people actually asking for this? Like, and I say, it's not that they're asking, but they're not asking like, can I have a privacy by design backend? That's not exactly how they ask the question. What they ask is, where is the data stored? What they ask is, who has access to the data? What they ask is this in compliance with GDPR and other data protection regulations? They ask, well, if you're storing the data, what happens if you have a bad apple in your company? So these are the questions that customers are asking. If they're looking for the solution, they're not necessarily, asking for the technology. So that's where we come in, because we don't need to get into all of the nitty gritty. We just explain and at a very basic level how we satisfy, how we prevent insider threats. There's no key management in Anonybit. There's nobody in Anonybit or in a customer, in a partner, anyone that has the keys to the kingdom because there are no keys and there is no specific kingdom. When they talk about regulation and they talk about where is the data stored and how do you, so the question to that, the answer to that is, it's not on the blockchain. We know where there are different parties that are hosting and managing the data. You can direct that. So for the questions, again, the answer is not to get into like exactly how each node works and all that stuff. It's really to tell them how we've satisfied the privacy by design framework that they're really, that they care about. And a lot of, the other question that they'll ask is, what about quantum? And then, so like, well, in the age of quantum computing, how do you protect these biometric templates? I don't want to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And the standard answer for the industry is, well, we have all these encryption and we're safe and we built it. And I was just with somebody yesterday and they were saying how it's a very, very large solution provider. So we were talking about how they've set up an infrastructure that is so complicated. And it's like impossible. Like, it's like they built Fort Knox around it. But you know what? If there's one person inside this company that has decided, for whatever reason, they want to be a bad actor, that person can bring the whole thing down, because it's all about encryption and it's all about keys. Look at Snowden, right? Look at the Capital One breach from a few years, many years ago. And even look at accidental breaches, like things that doesn't, we could pick on anyone, right? It's like every day, it's another day, another breach, right? AT&T, whatever. It's like, anybody can be a target and anyone can be, it can happen to anyone. So this is not picking on anyone, but it just boils down to, if you have a bad actor or you have somebody who's inadvertently, been compromised or tricked, all of these very, very sophisticated schemes can just be compromised very, very easily. And then factor in, like the whole quantum aspect, and then it starts to get really, really complicated. So that's really how we see like people asking the question. And if they are concerned about these things, about quantum, about who has access to the data, where's the data stored, and all of that, then it's very easy for us to answer the question without getting into a whole massive dialogue. And it's also, I would say, a big shift for us, because when we started the company, really nobody knew what we were doing. And we didn't have the full-fledged product. So it was all about the technology.
Right.
So I'm sure you remember, in the early days, all I did was talk about the technology. And now I talk much more about the use cases and the problems that we're solving and how we deploy and how we integrate. And it's just a very different conversation.
Yeah. This is, again, Tony, we've got another echo of our conversation with Jay Meyer, because he didn't talk about quantum, but he talked about like this over focus on cryptography, and that cryptography alone is not going to save you, was basically what he was saying.
Yeah, well, he has the PKI fallacy.
Yes.
I mean, his point is that you can't rely on keys. You need to, and this is, so Anonybit actually takes it a step further, because there are use cases where you need keys. But what Jay talks about is that you shouldn't rely on a device key that is generated through an outside party, essentially, that the enterprise does not know or does not have access to. And Anonybit, we solve for the exact same. We solve it because we actually bind the asset, the key, the token, the device, whatever it is, we actually bind it to the biometric profile itself. So inherently with Anonybit, you have multi-factor authentication. So, I mean, I agree with Jay in that you can't just have like a key and then have like, or something generated by a device. And what happens in use cases where there's shared devices, like go back to the Amazon and the POP, like that doesn't work. So it's in our world, it's really binding the cryptographic key to the real, what I call the real biometric, meaning that the real biometric is what the enterprise has ascertained is the real identity. And then you can bind the key to that, and then you can do whatever action you want, right? There's payment tokens. So imagine like, you know, you're making a payment, right? You have to release the token, but you want to make sure it's the right person to release the token. So this is where we come into play.
That's a really smart way to put it. Yeah, I was going to go back also to the conversations you've been having where people don't know like in technical terms what they're asking for, but they know what they're asking for, which is the solution to the problem. Does the word decentralized mean anything to a lot of people? Because I feel like this is a very buzzy word now that is kind of a simple way to explain. This is decentralized data storage or decentralized ABIS or something like that.
Yeah, so I think when you tell people decentralize, their mind automatically goes to blockchain. Yeah. And we took a lot of, we thought about this a lot. Should we use the word decentralized or not and whatnot? And also then if you say decentralized identity, that means something else. But, you know, the marketer in me decided that it's better to say that we're a decentralized framework that's not on the blockchain than to start re-educating and introducing yet another terminology that, you know, then people have to be like, wait, that sounds like this. What's it? So we kind of stayed with the decentralized, but it's not on the blockchain framework. And then if somebody like knows or is comfortable or familiar, we get into the world of verifiable credentials or decentralized identities, and we can talk about that as a credential that is linked to the blockchain, but that's different than decentralized biometrics, which is literally like distributing the biometric information.
Well, Frances, I know we're running short on time, so is there anything else that you can share with us about what's in the pipeline?
Well, there's going to be a lot more to come. You know, I would just say, I do think that we're in early stages of this, but there's already a lot of validation, not just here at Anonybit, but globally, right? Sam Altman announced a couple of weeks ago, WorldCoin is moving to a similar framework. That was like a big validation. So I think we are really just seeing the beginning of biometric privacy by design biometrics, or however you want to call it, really being rolled out. And I'm really bullish about where this is going. And I think that the partnership again with Armatura and with Rank One and with others, you know, just shows that you can take tier one existing mistested certified technologies and deploy them responsibly.
Well, I'm with you on that, and we're really excited about the approach that you're taking with Anonybit. So thank you for coming on the show and clearing up all of our lingering questions about exactly how this works. Hopefully the consultant that I was talking to now has a crystal clear idea, and we're looking forward to talking to you again as you have more developments.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, and always good to chat.
Thanks, Frances.
Take care. Bye-bye.